You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussions, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Lofton.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Reason and Theology. Your host, Michael. I wanted to cover some topics that have been in the news lately. As y'all know, I'm trying to transition to a schedule where I dedicate certain days to particular topics, and today is dedicated to current events. I smile here because I was just sent an article about something pretty interesting, and I'm sneaking it in last second. That's going to be the first thing we're reviewing. The big thing that I want to review, which we'll look at here in a little bit, is going to be the German bishops and whether or not they're going to continue their dissent. But I also want to talk about some comments from Father James Martin recently, as well as comments from Pope Francis about resignations, papal resignations specifically. Then I want to talk about Bishop Paprocki's essay recently on the question of cardinals who teach heresy. And then lastly, we'll maybe briefly watch a short clip of the Attorney General Merrick Garland being grilled by the Senate Judiciary Committee, which I found pretty interesting. But first, let me remind you, hit that subscribe button and the like button. Try to help me grow this channel. And also, the show is sponsored by realestateforlife.org. So if you want to buy a home or sell a home and you want to support the pro-life movement, certainly check them out. Okay, let me pull up the first one here. This is from California Catholic Daily. And it is about James Martin asking the question of whether or not a certain governor, specifically the governor of Florida, is going to be denied communion. Kind of an interesting question to ask, right? And we'll see why here in a second. Well, the article says pro-LGBT Jesuit priest Father James Martin has called for conservative Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is Catholic, to be denied communion because he supports the death penalty. Last week, the Republican governor signed the death warrant for a convict on charges of a second murder committed after the man escaped from a life sentence imposed for his first murder. In response to the execution of Donald Dilbeck, Martin used the issue to imply that DeSantis was dissenting from Catholic teaching on the death penalty and should therefore be refused communion. In what appears to be a tit-for-tat with Catholic bishops who insist that pro-abortion politicians and those who engage in sexual acts outside of marriage, such as those living in homosexual lifestyles, and whom Martin continually defends, may not receive communion. Taking to Twitter, his preferred pulpit, Martin wrote, "Many U.S. bishops have said that Catholic politicians who don't follow church teachings, especially on life issues, should be denied communion. Will they call for Governor Ron DeSantis to be denied communion? Church teaching is that the death penalty is inadmissible." Kind of a interesting question for him to ask. Okay. It's a fair question to ask. Should he be denied Holy Communion for defending the death penalty? But the pink elephant in the room is, should one who supports same-sex acts also be denied Holy Communion, right? And upon what basis should one who supports the death penalty be denied Holy Communion, but not those who publicly support same-sex acts? What's the difference there? Especially when we're considering that something is inadmissible versus something being a doctrinal error, right? They're not the same thing. Question of the death penalty would be more disciplinary. The question of same-sex acts would be doctrinal in nature, a matter of faith and morals, not just mere discipline. So again, upon what basis should someone be denied Holy Communion for a discipline, but then also not denied communion for a doctrinal problem? It just seems a little inconsistent. So I thought that was a little interesting, especially to see who is calling for the governor to be denied Holy Communion. Look, after all, you can just simply take the same things that I think Father Martin would use to say, well, there's mitigating circumstances for those who may support same-sex acts. Maybe there's a misunderstanding, or maybe there's a lack of full consent in their will or something like that. Okay, well, if we want to take that argument, all right. But can't we also apply that to the question of the death penalty in the case of the governor and just say, well, maybe the governor is confused. Maybe he has some misunderstanding in his knowledge, right? There's some mitigating circumstances there. Maybe he doesn't necessarily know if this is binding on him. He may just be under the impression that Pope Francis is putting this forward as a discipline, but one in which he is free to dissent from in good conscience. Again, due to maybe a deficiency in his knowledge. And therefore, if he has mitigating circumstances in his knowledge, per the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it's not a grave sin. Well, it's not a mortal sin, I should say. And therefore, again, if one says, hey, well, this group shouldn't be denied Holy Communion because maybe they have mitigating circumstances, likewise, I think somebody could put that into this situation. However, I suspect it's a little bit more complex for some certain people who are raising this question. I'm not sure that there's an interest for consistency here, but I could be wrong. I hope to see more. Perhaps Father Martin will answer that and give us maybe a consistent answer. Now, the next thing that I wanted to take a look at was an article from, this one is from Reuters. Popes are for life. Resignation should not become a fashion, Francis says. So, it's kind of interesting. There was a whole lot of talk that Pope Francis would be perhaps retiring, right, or abdicating, to use the more appropriate term. And it turns out that that's just entirely baseless. In fact, Pope Francis thinks that it would be a mistake to all of a sudden make papal resignations a fashion. And he indicates he doesn't have any intention of going that direction. It says Pope Francis has said that pontiffs resigning instead of ruling for life should not become a fashion in the Roman Catholic Church and happen only in truly exceptional circumstances. The comments made in private conversations with fellow Jesuits during his recent trip to Democratic Republic of Congo were a shift away from previous remarks in which Francis said that longer lifespans and medical improvements could make retired popes an institution in the Church. La Stampa newspaper published the comments on Thursday in an article by Father Antonio Spadaro, a Rome-based Jesuit priest who attends the meetings and writes about them afterwards with the Pope's permission. Francis was asked on February 2nd about media reports that he would resign. He repeated a comment first made to a Spanish newspaper in December that several months after his election in 2013, he gave a Vatican official resignation letter to be used in case one day he suffered a severe medical condition that would leave him permanently unconscious and unable to make decisions. Basically, if he's incapacitated and really can't, serve the church and govern it, that there would be a resignation. This does not, however, in any way mean that popes retiring should become, let's say, a fashion, a normal thing, he said, which should put at ease a deal of people who have been concerned here. There's a lot of people that have been concerned and just think, okay, is this kind of a new fashion? Are we going to now have popes constantly resigning? In the case of a pope who has reached a point that he's really not able to govern the church, and it's effectively other people who are taking his place and governing the church, though not by name. Maybe in those cases it should be considered. But as long as the Pope is able to function and govern the church, shouldn't be a fashion. I believe that the papal ministry should be for life, he says. I don't see a reason why it should not be this way. Well, my question then is, okay, but does that work on the episcopal level? I mean, again, why have this standard for the papacy, but then a different standard when it comes to the local bishop? Just pointing that one out. Historic tradition is important. If instead we listen to gossip, then we would have to change popes every 6 months, he said. Yeah. In 2013, Pope Benedict, citing frail physical and mental health, became the first pontiff to resign in 600 years. Talks a little bit more about him. The tone of Francis's comments to the African Jesuits was in a marked contrast. to that which Francis used in the past when discussing the possible resignations of popes, including himself. And this is kind of where that idea that maybe he's going to be retiring pretty soon, this is where it kind of comes from. Returning from Canada last July, Francis said increasing age and ailments, including a knee problem that forces him to use a cane and wheelchair, made him realize that he had to slow down or decide to step aside. In August, he said popes who resign are humble. 2014, Francis said the resignation of Benedict a year before should not be seen as a unique case, and that by stepping down, Benedict had become an institution who opened the door of emeritus popes. And so based on those things, people have thought, okay, Pope Francis is going to most likely resign, and it's going to be soon because of this knee situation. But it's clear from subsequent things that Pope Francis said that no, that's not the case. And he also doesn't think it should be a fashion. In his conversation with African Jesuits this month, Francis said his own resignation for health reasons is not on my agenda for the moment. So, well, as I've said, enjoy Pope Francis while we have him, because I think we're in for a rocky ride with the next pontificate. I think it's going to be pretty challenging in some ways. So enjoy it while it lasts. All right, here's another one from CNA. And of course, this is in reference to the German bishops answering the question, are they going to continue in dissent? Again, from Catholic News Agency, they just put this out. Yesterday, in fact. Despite no from Vatican, German bishops move forward with plans for synodal council. So basically, the Vatican is saying, no, don't move forward with your German synodal council. They're saying, yeah, we're going to continue to move forward. And what you're going to see here is kind of a history of Rome opposing them on this issue. And Germany effectively saying, no, we're going to keep at it. Effectively, this is going to test Pope Francis's resolve. And it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds and what he does as far as discipline. It would be pretty tough to replace an entire Episcopal conference, but I don't know. It may come to that. Despite repeated warnings from the Vatican, a letter by the president of the German Bishops' Conference published Wednesday confirms that plans for a German synodal council are progressing. In the letter dated February 23rd and published March 1st, yesterday, Bishop George Batzing writes that the German bishops take the Vatican's concerns about a German synodal council seriously. So they're saying, hey, we're taking the Vatican's concerns seriously, but we're going to move forward. The message is addressed to Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin and to the prefects of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, Jesuit Cardinal Luis Ladaria, and the Dicastery of Bishops, Cardinal Mark Uye. The German bishop tells the cardinals a German synodal committee would prepare a synodal council over 3 years. This move, Batzing writes, is a sign that there is still a great need for clarification regarding future synodal cooperation. It continues. In a 4-page letter in January, the Vatican wrote that neither the synodal way, nor a body appointed by it, nor a bishops' conference have the competence to establish the synodal council at the diocesan, national, or parish level. So on all levels, effectively. So there's kind of no way out of that, right? You can't set this council up on a national level, on the local diocesan level, or even just the parish level. That covers pretty much all bases. Batzing's response says that the German side now wants to delve into the theological issues raised by Rome. Therefore, I ask for your understanding if I do not address individual aspects of your remarks in this letter, but gladly and gratefully take up the offer of conversation you have proposed. Is it really a conversation? Is that really what it is? Or is the Vatican saying, no, this is a little bit more than a conversation. We're telling you what you can and can't do. The conversation, Batzing asks, should continue in Rome as soon as possible, but after the final meeting of the German Synodal Way in Frankfurt. The German bishops are meeting this week in the East German town of Dresden for their plenary assembly. At the outset of this meeting, the papal nuncio to Germany, Archbishop Terovic, said that he had been commissioned ex officio to specify that according to a correct interpretation of the content of this letter, not even a diocesan bishop can establish a synodal council at the diocesan or parish level. So even just a local bishop cannot set up this kind of synod at basically the diocesan level, which is his territory, or even the parish level, which also includes his territory, but is more localized, obviously, to a parish. The nuncio also stated, CNA Deutsch reported that synodality did not mean creating new institutions with the risk of a further increase in bureaucracy. So again, the concern here is that there's going to be a new institution, effectively, of church government. And they do not have that authority, as the Vatican has said. Instead, he warned the German bishops what is needed is to revitalize the already existing diocesan bodies in a synodal spirit. That's kind of the goal. Take the structure that we already have and, yes, foster synodality there. But that doesn't mean create a new synodal council or ecclesial institution. Synodality was more a question of spirit and style than of structure, he said. Pope Francis and other church leaders have expressed serious concerns about plans to create a permanent synodal council for the German church, to say the least. Such a body would function as a consultative and decision-making body on essential developments in the church and society according to a synodal way proposal. More importantly, it would make fundamental decisions of supradiocesan significance on pastoral planning, questions of the future, and budgetary matters of the church that are not decided at the diocesan level. In response to warnings from Rome about taking such a step, Batzing in January already suggested he would pursue a fallback option. We in Germany are looking for a way of truly deliberating and deciding together without overriding the canonical regulations that affect the authority of the bishop. So we want to have this Synod Council, but not in a way that overrides the local bishop, the German prelate said. As to the objections raised at the meetings in the Vatican and confirmed in a letter approved by Pope Francis, Batzing in January repeated his public dismissal of these concerns and vowed the synodal way would continue pursuing its controversial agenda in the face of them. Not a good sign. When Rome is saying don't move forward and they're moving forward, not a good sign. And again, that is going to test the resolve of Pope Francis ultimately. And it's going to be interesting to see what he does. The bishops of Cologne, Regensburg, Passau, Eichstätt, and Augsburg wrote to the Vatican on December 21st, 2022. They raised what Batzing acknowledged were justified and necessary questions, particularly whether bishops could be compelled to abide by such a council's authority. So are bishops really bound to accept anything that they decide? This was not the case, the Vatican's letter said. The message written in German reminded Batzing that according to Lumen Gentium, the Second Vatican Council teaches, quote, that episcopal consecration together with the office of sanctifying also confers the office of teaching and of governing, which, however, of its very nature, can be exercised only in hierarchical communion with the head and the members of the college. So the role of the bishop has to be in communion and in coordination with the Pope and the rest of the bishops. Running to 4 pages, the latest Vatican letter to Germany said it was approved by Pope Francis. It was signed by the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, Cardinal Luis Laderia, and the former prefect of the Dicastery for Bishops, Cardinal Mark Huillet. Warning of a threat of a new schism from Germany, the Vatican already intervened in July 2022 against a German synodal way, as y'all recall. In fact, I covered that before. That's where the article cuts off. It's interesting. It says story continues below, but I don't see it continuing below. But you kind of get the gist of what's going on. They're effectively saying, no, we're going to continue with the synodal council, the synodal German way, and against the directives of Rome. And as I said, Pope Francis is going to have to either turn a blind eye or do something about it. So far, the Vatican hasn't turned a blind eye. It has been saying, nope, you can't do this. Oh, you guys are talking about approving this stuff over here? Nope, can't do that. CDF comes out with a document saying, nope, under no circumstances can you have, for instance, blessings of same-sex unions. So the Vatican has been intervening, but it's obvious that this hasn't been sufficient. So looks like things are going to have to become a little bit more strict, right? It looks like the Holy Father is going to have to bring out the big guns at this point. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is a essay that Bishop Paprocki penned. Very interesting essay if you haven't read it. Certainly go and check it out. He's talking about the question of heresy, especially in relation to cardinals. And he's asking, what happens if you have a cardinal that teaches heresy? Well, he is quick to note that, no, he doesn't automatically lose jurisdiction. It's the Pope who has to remove him. But he does point out, but if he teaches heresy, and of course, if this is something that is intentional, right? He would be automatically excommunicated from the church. So you would have the interesting case of a cardinal excommunicated from the church illegitimately, or illicitly, I should say, though validly, but illicitly, voting in a conclave for a pope. And yet not having been removed from office, even though he's been personally automatically excommunicated. It's an interesting question, right? And you can also say the same thing about a bishop, not necessarily just a cardinal, but he'll tell you why he's addressing the question with the cardinal here in a second. But yeah, it's a curious question, because some people think, look, if you're automatically excommunicated, that's it. You don't have any jurisdiction in the church. Actually, no, you still do as a bishop, or even a cardinal. If you hold some kind of office, the Pope has to remove them before they lose that kind of authority. Though curiously, they could be cut off from the church automatically due to heresy. So it's an interesting position to be in. Okay, so he raises the question. And the article describes that. So I'm not going to read the essay to you. In fact, you could just go to the article that is in the show notes and click here on that link, and it'll take you to the essay. Not very long and well worth reading. But it says Bishop Thomas Paprocki of Springfield, Illinois, on Tuesday published an essay in which he quotes the words of Cardinal Robert McElroy of San Diego as one of two examples of views contrary to a truth, which is to believe by divine and Catholic faith, which basically is dogmatic, and thus heretical, right? Because heresy is the proper censor to dogma. In the February 28th essay published in First Things, Paprocki, a canon and civil lawyer, criticized the words of McElroy pertaining to worthiness to receive Holy Communion, and also obliquely referred to a cardinal of the Catholic Church publicly that homosexual acts are not sinful and the same-sex unions should be blessed by the church. Also, interesting article in light of what we just saw from James Martin's question about denying the governor Holy Communion because of his dissent on the question of the death penalty, given that the bishop here is noting that effectively to deny the church's teaching on same-sex marriages is clearly heresy. They should not be administered Holy Communion, further reinforcing the question that I proposed: upon what basis can you deny the person who disagrees with the death penalty and yet not also deny Holy Communion to those who disagree with the teaching of the church on same-sex acts? Until recently, it would be hard to imagine any successor of the apostles making such heterodox statements. You know what? Sorry, I'm going to have to disagree with you there, Bishop Paprocki. I mean, I wish that were true, right? But I don't know. I've seen some rough things from cardinals and bishops, in church history. So unfortunately, it is not uncommon today to hear Catholic leaders affirm unorthodox views that not too long ago would have been espoused only by heretics, wrote the bishop, who is chairman-elect of the U.S. Bishops' Committee on Canonical Affairs and Church Governance. Well, not to make light of the situation, but I mean, what else is new, right? Haven't we been dealing with that for 2,000 years? Again, not to make light of the situation, but yeah, it's not really new to our era. While Paprocki did not name McElroy directly, he quoted in his opening paragraph a recent essay McElroy authored in America Magazine on the radical inclusion of those identifying as LGBT women and others in the church. In that essay, McElroy called for a Eucharistic theology that ineffectively invites all of the baptized to the table of the Lord, rather than a theology of Eucharistic coherence that multiplies barriers to the grace and gift of the Eucharist. McElroy, later in a podcast interview, clarified that by the baptized, he was referring to all baptized Catholics, and said that his view stemmed from Pope Francis's description of the Eucharist as not a prize for the perfect, but as a source of healing for all, which I think is an abuse of Pope Francis's words there, because what he's saying is true. The Eucharist is not a prize for the perfect, given that nobody's perfect. And it is a source for healing, absolutely. But that has nothing to do with the question of somebody who is in mortal sin. For somebody who is in mortal sin, the Eucharist is not their healing. The sacrament of confession is their healing. And I don't think that Pope Francis was indicating otherwise. But of course, that's often how those words of his are taken. At issue, Paprocki wrote, is McElroy's apparent rejection of the Catholic Church's teaching contained in the Catechism of the Catholic Church that anyone aware of having sinned mortally must not receive communion without having received absolution in the sacrament of penance. In Paprocki's view, McElroy's statement on the Eucharist are contrary to a truth which is to be believed by divine and Catholic faith, which, again, would be dogmatic. The truth about Eucharistic coherence that must be believed by divine and Catholic faith was articulated by St. Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians. Whoever eats the bread and drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty of profaning the body and blood of the Lord. For anyone who eats and drinks without discerning the body eats and drinks judgment upon himself. That's 1 Corinthians 11, 27 through 29. Moreover, we could add to that what St. Paul and others in the New Testament, not just Old, but in the New Testament, said about the question of same-sex acts. See Romans 1, for instance. This had been the constant teaching of the church for the past 2,000 years, Paprocki said. It is deeply troubling to consider the possibility that prelates holding the office of diocesan bishop in the Catholic Church may be separated or not in full communion because of heresy. Yet both the cases mentioned above would in fact involve heresy, since heresy is defined as the obstinate denial and obstinate doubt after the reception of baptism of some truth which is to be believed by divine and Catholic faith, he wrote. So if the person is obstinately denying or doubting a dogma, then it's heresy. And of course, we know, according to canon law, there's an automatic penalty of excommunication for that, which puts it, puts an individual in an awkward position of automatically excommunicated, yet still being, over in office in the church. In a Wednesday stating to CNA, Paprocki said in his essay was not intended to be an accusation of any cardinal in particular. I intentionally did not mention names because I do not want this to be about the personalities involved, but about the Catholic teachings that are being denied, Paprocki said. And okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Is it not contrary to the Catholic faith and therefore heresy to say that sexual sins are not grave matter, he asks. Is it not contrary to Catholic faith and therefore heresy to say that one may receive Holy Communion despite having committed grave sin without repenting? If so, what are the canonical implications of such heresy, he told CNA. That is why the essay is titled, Imagine a Heretical Cardinal, not accusing a heretical cardinal. So he's keeping it general rather than naming anyone specific. In the case of a person holding heretical views, that person has de facto separated themselves ontologically. That is in reality from the communion of the church, Paprocki wrote in his essay. Thus, heretics, apostates, and schismatics inflict the penalty of excommunication upon themselves, he wrote. A cardinal of the Catholic Church, like any other Catholic who denies settled Catholic teaching, embraces heresy, the result of which is automatic excommunication from the church, which I just did a show on that a few days ago. Should we bring back excommunications? And I kind of weighed in on the question. I'm not necessarily in favor of automatic excommunications. The reason why is a lot of people hide behind those in order to not actually declare the excommunication. That's the problem. So somebody might be automatically excommunicated, and yet the vast majority of people don't know it because it hasn't been declared by governmental or the church's governmental authority, or hierarchical authority, I should say. And so it sometimes is abused. Now, I know abuse doesn't negate proper use, but given that it's abused so often, I just kind of wonder, should we have it right now? Should we have these automatic excommunications, or rather, should we just do better with declaring excommunications? I don't know, but that's a separate question. You can certainly check out that video I did about a week or so ago. Only the Pope can remove a cardinal from office or dismiss him from the clerical state in the case of heresy or other grave crimes. So notice that again. It's not like he automatically loses office if he holds office and he's in heresy, that is the cardinal or a bishop. If he does not do so, the unseemly prospect arises of a cardinal excommunicated automatically due to heresy voting in a papal conclave, Paprocki continued, which, as we know, according to John Paul II, the vote would be illicit, yet still valid, right? So the person who's elected pope would still actually be pope. It's just that the person, one of the people voting there, it was done illicitly. It was done in an illicit way. Kind of like the same distinction that we offer for the liturgy. You could have a mass that's validly done, but illicitly celebrated, right? Maybe a priest who doesn't have faculties, he could validly confect the Eucharist, but that doesn't mean he's illicitly doing so. The Diocese of San Diego did not respond by press time to CNA's request for a response from McElroy to Paprocki's assessment of his view on the Eucharist. So that is it for that article. Certainly interesting, very happy, and I can certainly say I personally welcome the discussion. Very glad that Bishop Paprocki has raised it. We need to see more discussions like that coming from our bishops. Happy to see that one. Warmly welcome it, and I welcome more. Love to see more, especially in relation to the question that I brought up at the beginning of the show with the situation with same-sex acts and Father James Martin. Let's see. I am going to share my screen, and we're going to watch for a few minutes here AG Merrick Garland being grilled by Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri on or in the Senate Judiciary Committee on the question of profiling Catholics, which has been something that recently came out with a memorandum from the FBI. And so he's being questioned about this and is saying, look, are you guys profiling Catholics? Are you mistreating them by doing so? So watch this. Share my screen here. I'm going to enable audio. We're going to watch it together. This thing was get ready for a ride. It was interesting. but Senator Josh Hawley, the guy who's grilling AG Merrick, I feel a kindred spirit in this guy, because if I were a senator, I kind of feel like this is exactly the kind of question that I would be asking the AG, and in the exact same style too.
Attorney General Garland, let me just ask you, does your department have a problem with anti-Catholic bias?
Our department protects all religions and all ideologies. It does not have any bias against any religion of any kind.
Well, you could have surprised me, because given the resources that you are expending and the apparently intelligence assets that you are deploying against Catholics, it appears, and other people of faith, while simultaneously turning a blind eye while people are executed gang style in the streets of our cities, including in my home state, your answer frankly surprises me. Let's talk about the Mark Houck case, for example. You've been asked about this already today, and frankly, your answers really astound me. This is a case where a Catholic pro-life demonstrator, father, was accused of disorderly conduct in front of an abortion center. The local prosecutor, the Philadelphia district attorney, who is a Democrat, a liberal, very progressive, declined to prosecute. There was a private suit that got dismissed. And then after all of that, your Justice Department sent between 20 and 30 armed agents in the early morning hours to the Houck's private residence to arrest this guy after he had offered to turn himself in voluntarily. Here's the photo. Once again, you can see the long guns. You can see the ballistic shields. You can see that they're wearing bulletproof vests. Why did the Justice Department do this? Why did you send 20 to 30 SWAT-style agents and a SWAT-style team to this guy's house when everybody else had declined to prosecute and he'd offered to turn himself in?
Determinations of how to make arrests under arrest warrants are made based by the tactical operators in the district. They are not.
But you surely looked into it by this point, right? You know the answer, surely.
All I know is what.
This is my kind of guy. Don't let him off the hook. Don't let him off the hook. Force him to answer.
The FBI has said, which is that they made decisions on the ground as to what was safest and easiest.
So
They
you
do not agree with your description of what happened on the scene.
You don't agree with my description. I'm pointing out what the photo is. There are agents here who have long guns and ballistic shields. Let's take a look at the hardened criminals that your Justice Department sent these armed agents to go terrorize on that morning. Here they are. Here they are at Mass. Here's the 7 children with Mr. Houck and his wife.
I love the props that he's using here. This is good.
In this early morning, they were all at home. Mrs. Houck has said repeatedly the children were screaming. They feared for their lives. You got these agents demanding that he come out. They've got the guns, she said, pointing at the house and at them. He has offered to turn himself in. And this is who you go to terrorize. What's really interesting to me is this seems to directly contradict your own memorandum about the use of force at the Justice Department. You say officers may use only the force that is objectively reasonable to effectively control an incident. Are you telling me that in your opinion as Attorney General, it was objectively necessary to use 20 or 30 SWAT-style agents with long guns and ballistic shields for these people?
What I'm saying is that decisions about how to go about this were made on the ground by FBI agents.
So you're saying you don't know?
Just repeating the same stuff. Come on.
No?
I'm saying what I just said.
Which is that you're abdicating responsibility?
I'm not abdicating
Then
responsibility.
give me the answer. Do you think, in your opinion, you are the Attorney General of the United States? You are in charge of the Justice Department. And yes, sir, you are responsible.
Yeah.
So give me an answer.
The FBI does not agree with your description.
I'm not asking about the FBI. You are the Attorney General. Give me your answer. Do you think that it was objectively reasonable and they followed your guidelines?
Don't let them off the hook. This is good. This is good.
You think that it was objectively reasonable and they followed your guidelines in sending 20 to 30 armed agents to terrorize these people? Yes or no?
The facts I have, which are those presented by the FBI, are not consistent with your description.
So you think it was reasonable?
Look at this guy. He's laughing the whole time. he can't keep a straight face.
I'm saying the facts are not as you describe.
What, that the children weren't there? That there weren't long guns there? That there weren't agents? What do you dispute? What's the factual premise you dispute? Be
FBI
specific.
said they don't agree with your description of
Be specific. They don't agree with what?
of how many agents, of the agents who were there, and of what their roles were. They don't agree.
Do you know the
That's all I can
jury
say.
in this case acquitted Mr. Houck? I'm sure you're aware. Do you know how long it took him?
I am aware, and we respect the decision of the jury.
Do you know how long it took him?
I don't know.
1 hour. 1 hour. Philadelphia District Attorney declines to prosecute. The private suit's dismissed. You use an unbelievable show of force with guns that I just note liberals usually decry. We're supposed to hate long guns and assault-style weapons. You're happy to deploy them against Catholics and innocent children. Happy to. And then you haul him into court and a jury acquits him in 1 hour. I just suggest to you that that is a disgraceful performance by your Justice Department and a disgraceful use of resources. I notice a pattern, though. The FBI field office in Richmond on the 23rd of January of this year issued a memorandum in which they advocated for, and I quote, the exploration of new avenues for tripwire and source development against traditionalist Catholics, it's their language, including those who favor the Latin Mass. Attorney General, are you cultivating sources and spies in Latin Mass parishes and other Catholic parishes around the country?
No, the Justice Department does not do that. It does not do investigations based on religion. I saw the document you have.
What did you do about it?
It's appalling. It's appalling. I'm in complete agreement with you. I understand that the FBI has withdrawn it and is now looking into how this could ever have happened.
How did it happen?
That's what they're looking into.
And he doesn't know.
But I'm totally in agreement with you. That document is appalling.
I'll tell you how it happened. This memorandum, which is supposed to be intelligent, cites extensively the Southern Poverty Law Center, which goes on to identify all of these different Catholics as being part of hate groups. Is
Yeah, not the best source.
this how the FBI, under your direction and leadership, is this how they do their intelligence work? They look at left-wing advocacy groups to target Catholics? Is this what's going on? I mean, clearly it is. How is this happening?
The FBI is not targeting Catholics. And as I've said, this is an inappropriate memorandum, and it doesn't reflect the methods that the FBI is supposed to be using. Should not be relying on any single organization without doing its own work.
Let me just ask you, is my time
Did it do its own work in this case? And if not, why not?
expires here? Very direct question. How many informants do you have in Catholic churches across America?
I don't know. And I don't believe we have any informants aimed at Catholic churches. We have a rule against investigations based on First Amendment activity, and Catholic churches are obviously First Amendment activity.
Well,
but I don't know a specific answer to your question.
You don't know the specifics of anything, it seems, but apparently on your watch, this Justice Department is targeting Catholics, targeting people of faith, specifically for their faith views. And Mr. Attorney General, I'll just say to you, it's a disgrace.
Well said. Well said. I was glad to see that. That was one of the most satisfying things to see, because here the senator was not letting him off the hook with the non-answers. And I'm thinking, yep, that's my kind of guy right there. Really enjoyed that. Although it's, again, sad to see with the FBI, the memorandum. I was happy to see the Bishops' Conference of the United States responded to it not long ago. But yeah, really glad to see this from the senator, rightly grilling the AG on this, who clearly doesn't know what's going on and doesn't have answers, or at least doesn't want to provide the answers, right? One of the two. Anyways, hope y'all enjoy this. If you did, hit that like button and the subscribe button. If you want to see more of these, let me know, and we'll continue to do them on Thursdays if so. But put your comments there in the comment section so I know if you want to see more of these current events, analyses, shows once a week on Thursday. Anyways, that's going to do it. Hit the like button and the subscribe button. Check me out, patreon.com/reason and theology if you want to support me. That'll do it. We'll see you later. God bless.
If you're looking to buy or sell a home, office, or any kind of property anywhere in the world, you're going to want to call Real Estate for Life, and they're going to connect you with a Catholic agent. Now, that agent will donate a portion of their commission upon sale, and Real Estate for Life will donate 75% of that gift to a pro-life organization at no cost to you. Call Real Estate for Life at 1-877-LIFE-US1 or text them 248-431-1440. If you care about the pro-life cause, call them now. Is it possible that ancient aliens created other ancient aliens? Ancient alien theorists say yes. But then, is it also possible that ancient aliens created the ancient alien theorists? And are the ancient aliens and ancient alien theorists led by the Vatican, headed by the Pope? Ancient alien theorists and certain unnamed Catholic YouTubers say yes. Tired of Catholic shows that peddle conspiracy theories that sound like something out of an Ancient Aliens episode? Check out Reason and Theology for a more reasonable take. Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button. God bless.